America's heartland, long celebrated for its expansive cornfields in the Midwest and cotton plantations across the South, is facing an agricultural crisis unlike anything in recent memory. What was once a symbol of stability, economic strength, and cultural identity is now under intense pressure. Trade policies, tariffs, and shifts in global demand have converged to create a perfect storm for U.S. farmers, threatening their livelihoods and challenging America's position as a global agricultural leader. The crisis began quietly, almost imperceptibly. Farmers were harvesting record yields, expecting prosperity. Corn silos were full, and cotton fields appeared abundant. Yet buyers suddenly disappeared. For decades, China had been the dominant importer of U.S. soybeans, corn, and cotton. In 2025, however, Chinese purchases dropped precipitously. Corn exports to China, historically representing nearly 60% of U.S. shipments, fell by as much as 79% in a single season. Meanwhile, a 15% tariff on American cotton made it nearly 20% more expensive than competitors in Brazil and India. These countries quickly filled the market gap, capturing contracts that had long been guaranteed to American growers. For U.S. farmers, the consequences were immediate and severe. Silos overflowed with unsold corn, and cotton bales went unshipped. Prices plunged below break-even points, turning what should have been a year of abundance into a season of financial distress. Thousands of farms across Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, Texas, Arkansas, and Georgia reported losses. Emergency loans became necessary just to keep crops from rotting, and rising input costs, including fertilizer, fuel, and transportation, compounded the problem. Even with record yields, many farmers faced negative net returns, struggling to cover the cost of production. The human impact is profound. Farm families, some working the same land for generations, now face impossible decisions. The younger generation is leaving in search of urban employment, leaving communities vulnerable to depopulation. Schools, hospitals, and local businesses, dependent on farm income, are feeling the strain. Rural towns, once tight-knit, are beginning to fragment under economic stress. Politically, the crisis is charged. The hardest-hit states, Texas, Arkansas, Georgia, and Iowa, form the core of President Trump's electoral coalition. Farmers who once strongly supported tariffs are now publicly voicing frustration. Town halls and Farm Bureau meetings, once focused on planting schedules, now debate emergency relief, subsidies, and policy reform. Constituents demand urgent action as their livelihoods are threatened. Corn, long a symbol of Midwest productivity, illustrates the crisis starkly. Despite record harvests in 2025, prices dropped below 43 a bushel, far under the cost of production. Grain elevators and feed mills operated below capacity, trucking companies faced idle fleets, and Gulf Coast ports handled drastically reduced volumes. Rural banks, which had provided loans based on predictable export demand, saw a sharp rise in non-performing loans, threatening the financial stability of entire agricultural regions. The situation was more than a local problem. It was a potential regional financial crisis in the heart of American agriculture. Cotton, the South's economic and cultural backbone, faced similar hardships. U.S. cotton exports to Asia fell more than 70% within 9 months due to China's tariff, leaving Southern growers struggling. Farmers in Texas, Arkansas, and Georgia, whose livelihoods were historically tied to cotton, saw incomes collapse. Overhead costs remained high, and selling additional bales often deepened losses. Bankruptcy filings surged, reflecting the financial strain across the agricultural sector. Meanwhile, global competitors capitalized on the U.S. downturn. Brazil achieved record cotton exports, surpassing the U.S. as China's top supplier. India expanded cotton acreage by 12%, securing contracts previously dominated by American producers. Corn markets saw Ukraine and Argentina emerge as reliable alternatives for Asian buyers, offering consistent supply and competitive prices. Importers diversified not only to reduce cost, but also to mitigate political risk, reducing reliance on the U.S. These disruptions extend far beyond individual farms. Ports in New Orleans, Houston, and other Gulf Coast terminals now handle diminished volumes. Trucking companies, rail operators, and grain elevators operate below capacity, Equipment manufacturers, packaging companies, and fertilizer producers face reduced demand. Rural banks report increasing defaults as loans tied to expected exports go unpaid, threatening local economies. The cascading effect reaches small towns, where schools, hospitals, and local businesses rely heavily on the farm economy. Socially, the impact is visible. Families are struggling to maintain farms amid falling revenues. Young adults leave for urban employment, eroding the social fabric of rural communities. Generations-long traditions and community cohesion face disruption. Farmers must make impossible choices, whether to sell crops at a loss, store them at additional cost, or abandon the land entirely. Communities that once thrived are seeing economic decline and depopulation. The crisis also carries political consequences. Constituents in key states are pressuring local representatives, demanding relief and action. States that were historically loyal to the Trump administration are witnessing growing discontent as farmers confront financial hardship. The policy designed to protect American agriculture now threatens the very voters it once mobilized. National farmer organizations have issued warnings that without intervention, many producers may not survive another season. Internationally, the situation has reconfigured agricultural trade. Brazil's cotton exports have surged, securing long-term partnerships with Asian buyers. India's increased cotton acreage captures contracts that were previously American, while Ukraine and Argentina solidify their roles as essential corn suppliers. Even Europe has begun diversifying purchases, reducing reliance on U.S. commodities. These adjustments are not temporary. They represent a structural shift in global trade, threatening long-term American influence. The loss of trust in American exports compounds the problem. Commodity traders now price political volatility into U.S. contracts. Countries perceive American shipments as less reliable, and long-term contracts are being awarded to competitors. Once these markets shift, reclaiming them is extremely difficult. The collapse of corn and cotton should be seen as a warning for the broader U.S. agricultural sector. If two of America's strongest crops can falter so quickly, the stability of soybeans, wheat, and beef exports may be at risk. The cascading effects on value chains are profound. Grain elevators, rail networks, ports, and trucking corridors are all impacted, while ancillary businesses from packaging to logistics to equipment face declining revenue. Rural banks, financing farms, deal with rising defaults, threatening regional financial stability. Families see household incomes shrink, young adults leave, and communities face cultural as well as economic erosion. This agricultural crisis is not only a market story but also a social and political one. Rural voters, historically supportive of protective trade policies, are questioning the efficacy of tariffs. Local and national leaders are under pressure as constituents demand relief. Meanwhile, global competitors, Brazil, India, Ukraine, and Argentina, solidify positions in long-term contracts, further displacing the U.S. from markets it once dominated. The broader lesson is stark. America's role as the world's agricultural anchor is under threat. If the nation's most iconic crops can falter under political and tariff pressures, the resilience of other sectors is called into question. What was once a robust and reliable system is now exposed, revealing vulnerabilities in supply chains, market trust, and rural economies. Trade policies intended to protect American farmers have inadvertently contributed to this structural risk. Corn and cotton, two pillars of U.S. agriculture, illustrate how policy, international competition, and market perception interact to reshape global supply chains. The combination of tariffs, foreign competition, and shifting demand has created a scenario where even record harvests do not guarantee financial stability. Rural communities, farm families, and small-town economies all feel the consequences, highlighting the interconnectedness of local production, international trade, and global market trust. In conclusion, the collapse of corn and cotton exports is a multifaceted crisis. It is a story of lost contracts, flooded silos, and mounting debt. It is a story of families forced to make impossible choices, small towns struggling to survive, and the erosion of America's reputation in global markets. It is also a story of opportunity for foreign competitors who are rapidly filling gaps left by U.S. producers. The consequences will likely ripple through rural America, the political landscape, and global agriculture for years to come. If two of America's most productive and symbolic crops can falter, the question remains, what else in the U.S.? The economy might be more fragile than it appears, and how long will it take for policymakers to respond before the damage becomes permanent?